So this is it, episode 1. This is Clemson Road Creative. My name is Kasie Whitener, and with me is my good friend and business partner, Jodie Kane-Smith. And this is our very first episode of our podcast. We're calling the podcast Earning Miles. We think the concept of getting some distance and also building experience and building credibility and all those things kind of go along with that. Plus, of course, we're Clemson Road, so everything we do has some kind of travel branding to it. So here we go. The very first episode is about practical entrepreneurism. And I kind of dragged you into this topic, Jodie. I'm writing this textbook for my classes. It's not really a textbook. It's kind of a course supplement. I'm getting away from the traditional concept of a textbook, which is that big, heavy thing that you could like beat people with, but you never actually read it, into more of a digital program where people can log in, they can access all this additional material that would be very heavily on the practitioner side. So a lot of blogs, a lot of videos, a lot of MP3 files, and then also having some of that scholarship to back it up too. But for most part, it's focused on the practical application of entrepreneurial ideas. And so I decided to call it Practical Entrepreneurism. So because that's the name of the textbook, that seems to be the pivot that we've taken now in our entrepreneurial education. And I thought it'd be kind of fun to talk on our first podcast about what that means to us and what we think of that and all that. So we have a pretty easy agenda. You can follow along in the show notes. It's on clemsonroad.com on the blog, and they're also here below the video in the YouTube posting, so you can get them there as well. The show notes will give you hyperlinks to all the things that we're talking about, and you can, of course, follow us and subscribe to our channel from there. So Jodie, let's get right to it. Okay. Practical entrepreneurism. So let's talk about first the entrepreneurial education piece. So I'm teaching entrepreneurship at the University of South Carolina, and they've moved entrepreneurship out of the business school and into this like campus-wide approach through the McNair Institute. And the idea is that you can major in absolutely anything and still be an entrepreneur. So what are your thoughts on that? Did you major in business?
Oh God, no. I was a theater major. The entrepreneurism and everything that goes into it is actually why I think people should always hire theater majors if they show up in your resume pile. Because we have to be entrepreneurs. Every time a show is mounted, it's all the same problems. And every show is its own little business. It's never been created before. It has to have its own, branding that works within the umbrella of the actual building of the theater and the producers that are putting it on. But from start to finish, you are creating something new. If you're doing a reprisal, which chances are you are, it's you're trying to find that new within an old idea, and then you have to sell it to an entirely new audience. And between the thinking of the idea and the selling it, you encounter all of these problems.
Yeah. If nothing else, entrepreneurship is rife with problems, right? And as soon as you get one solved, something pops up somewhere else. Yeah. So it's like playing whack-a-mole.
There's going to be hurdles and hoops and all this kind of stuff. And so that's my educational background is in theater arts. My entrepreneurial journey started when I decided to chuck my Department of the Army civilian career and become an author. So I, talk about living on a shoestring budget and having to really learn from the ground up how to market yourself, how to create a brand. And so that's the perspective I come from, is from an arts entrepreneur background.
And we had that in common. So we met in the writers' workshop together and you were pursuing your author entrepreneur path. And while I was sort of dipping my toe in the author entrepreneur side, but really pursuing the business entrepreneurship and thinking about how do I build a company that more matches the kind of life that I want to have. So I'm wearing this t-shirt from my Broadway show, a Bronx Tale, and I'm sitting in front of my Wonder Woman poster because I don't think I'm cut out for the 8 to 5 in somebody else's office.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to build something that more reflected the kind of company that's a personality that I want to have, that's where I feel comfortable being and where people look like me when we walk in the door, right? Which is the sort of phrase that people use when they talk diversity, but I think it applies to women entrepreneurs and women who are building their own business because they think to themselves, I don't see any CEOs that look like me or any even, upper vice presidents. The highest level ranking woman in the company that I worked for was a vice president, and she had sacrificed everything. I mean, absolutely everything to have what she had in that business. It was pretty, it was scary actually to look at what is that what my future looks like. So
Yeah.
our approach to entrepreneurship is a little different though, because we both come at it from this direction of not really having a choice. Like this was the thing that we just had to do. After a while, you've earned enough experience on one side of the line that you finally go, I just got to jump, and without a life preserver in most cases.
Yeah. The one time I've backslid, so to speak, um, since quitting the good salaried position, was when my son was just about to start preschool. There are no free preschool programs here, so it was going to be quite costly. I freaked out a bit, and I went back to something I did in my mid-20s, which was visual merchandising for a major retailer. And almost from day point 5, like halfway through my first day, I realized I can no longer do this. And I was going to have to sacrifice my, my sense of self. I was looking around going, these are not my people anymore. I don't understand these people.
Right.
I feel like I'm living somebody else's life. I didn't realize just how much I'd become. I had started to value all of the control I do have as an entrepreneur, even though sometimes it feels like we have no control over what is actually happening in our businesses. We do have a lot of control over our lives. And I realized, I was like, I can't sacrifice all of that. I can't sacrifice creativity. I can't sacrifice my entrepreneurial goals just to pay for tuition. There has to be another way. And so that's when, I hit the freelance writer job boards, and I was like, until Clemson Road Creative can pay me on a regular basis, that's a mountain every new company has to climb. I was like, I'll just pick up the freelancer gigs. And lo and behold, I was actually able to do that. And so as soon as humanly possible, I quit that visual merchandising job because, good Lord, I hated it. I hated every minute of it.
Yeah, and I backslide frequently. I'm in the classroom at the Darla Moore School, and the reason I'm teaching full time is I needed to get benefits for my family so that my husband could leave his job. He was
Yeah.
so unhappy in his job, and he was carrying all of our medical benefits and everything for us. And I thought, well, if I go teach at the university and I can get some benefits for the family, then Charlie can leave his job. He can pursue, what he wants. And that worked out for us over the summer. And
Yeah.
now I kind of find I dig it, right? Because I can do this teaching, which is considered my full-time employment, but it doesn't take me full time. Like,
Yeah.
don't tell anybody. But everybody knows, right? Like all the professors know that everybody knows that we're all working these side hustles, these side gigs. And what it did too was it took the burden off of Clemson Road. I didn't have to pay me, so I could pay you, which
Yeah.
was we were able to bring you in with the revenue that we had and get you a little bit more stable work because I was no longer depending on all that revenue that was coming in just to pay my salary. So it's been cool this past year to watch how we've been able to grow and how we've been able to pivot and shift. And we moved into this practical concept because we had watched all these other entrepreneurial training programs, and those in quotes, because there's not really like a school for entrepreneurship. There's like different programs at different universities, and then there's different city-led programs and all these online programs that try to teach you how to build a business. And we looked at all of them. And we were like, well, we know we know that. Right? Like what people are trying to sell us, we already know. And so we're like, okay, well, what are people not learning out there that we think we could share with them, that our experience has taught
Yeah.
us that we can share with them? And that's where the word practical comes from. What
Yeah.
can you actually do with the information we're giving you?
For me, the idea of practical entrepreneurship begins with knowing your resources. And what resources do you have in order to start this? And that's one thing that you mentioned. You went back to academia in order to have health insurance and benefits for your family. That was a resource I already had because of my husband's time in the Army. And so, I count that in the resource column. I count the fact that my Wi-Fi is through my home network. So no, I can't do anything with taxes for that. But that's one of my resources. And so I look at all of these things because I have a separate place in my house that my office is in. I don't need to spend money on renting office space or even, these shared office spaces. I already have that resource. Right. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they become overwhelmed by the huge concept of starting their own business, and they forget to take that little breath, that little step, and say, what do I actually already have?
Yeah.
And that can really lower your freak out moments.
Or at least put it off for a while.
Well, I mean, go ahead and count those chickens.
Right. That's right. Well, so it's interesting.
Or not.
One of the pieces I put in the show notes was when I first started 2012, I'm like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start my own business. And I went out and bought a book called The Girlfriend's Guide to Starting Your Own Business. And I was like, oh, this will be fun. And the very first page says, if you don't have 6 months worth of living expenses saved up, put this book down, go save, and come back when you've done that. And I was like, and I have never finished that book. I don't know if the rest of the book has any actual practical advice, because I didn't have 6 months. First of all, I didn't have 6 months living expenses. And secondly, I didn't have 6 months to give. I could not wait. There wasn't any full-time employment that was going to help me with this problem. So if the very first page of the book tells me that this is not going to be the book for me, I probably should have read that first page before I bought it. That may be why Amazon started showing you the first page, because somebody was like, what? This book was total trash. So I think that, of course, ideally you want to start your business in a situation where you do have resources, you have your income covered, you have something that you're not desperate to get to the very next sale. But I also think that a lot of entrepreneurs start because they don't have a choice. They either can't find work, or they're underemployed, or they're overworked in the industry that they're in, and they can't physically sustain that anymore. And so they're forced into entrepreneurship. And so I think that you're exactly right to say, what are the things that you have going for you? And what are the things that you're not going to have to invest in right off the bat, right? And there's a ton of free resources available to you too. I mean, you can start a website for free. You can start a social media group for free. There's a lot of, and later on, I think in some of our podcasts, we'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages of being on other people's platforms. But there are a lot of opportunities out there for people if you just leverage the tools in the right way. You just have to find the right tools and use them in the right way.
Yeah. Another concept within this idea of practical entrepreneurism that I have had to really bear down on at certain points in this whole experience is what am I not willing to sacrifice? So I've got, what are my resources, otherwise known as what don't I have to worry about as far as paying, as far as finding, things like that. And then also on this other side, and I learned this through, trying visual merchandising again for 3 months. What am I not willing to sacrifice? And, that might be the niche of whatever business you're in. You're not willing to sacrifice that. It may be that I recently met a woman who quit a very skyrocketing TV journalist position. She was an anchor and well loved, but she realized she was waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, not getting home until after dinner time kind of thing. And her children were raising themselves. And she was like, why did I have these awesome kids if I don't have anything to do with them?
Yeah.
And so she quit. And she had to sign a 6-month, 500-mile non-compete clause in order to quit. And she was like, but I knew I can't sacrifice these things anymore.
Right.
And she was like, so I walked away. Now she's doing radio shows, things like that, but it's all on her own.
Mm-hmm.
It's all her ideas. And I'm like, you know what? That's practical entrepreneurism is, what am I not willing to sacrifice anymore?
Yeah, I think you're hitting on the most important part of it, is that it's a philosophy, entrepreneurism, right? So instead of entrepreneurship, which is sort of the practice of building a business, which is what we typically teach people, and you can go to YouTube and you can find a ton of videos on how to get your permits and how to get your licensing and how to start your bank account and all these kinds of things, right? Like the entrepreneurship piece is pretty well covered on podcasts and websites all over the internet. But this concept of entrepreneurism, which is like, it's a philosophy, it's a state of mind, it's your belief that this can solve your problems, right? And not even just your own professional ideas and your professional challenges, right? But also that you can use entrepreneurism to solve other people's problems. So that's where, when Clemson Road decided to go to the shared services platform, it's because I was working in the Women's Business Center and I kept meeting all these other women consultants, independent consultants that were saying, I want to do more. I want to have a bigger business. I want to scale, but I can't because I'm bogged down with all this administrative stuff that I have to do. And so I said to you, like, hey, we pretty much nailed some of the stuff, the marketing, the project management, like we have that stuff taken care of. What if we were to offer that service to these other independent consultants and give them a chance to grow their business and scale their business in the way they want? And that's where the academy comes from. That's where the shared services platform comes from. It's us seeing that Clemson Road solved our problem for us, and now we can solve a specific problem for these other women independent consultants.
Also, I look at that as what we found was what the shared office space,
co-working.
What we found is an online co-working.
Yeah.
And that's something that entrepreneurs like me actually need. I do not need to get up, drive a mile down the street or walk, because the co-working space here is within walking distance of my house. I don't need to schlep my laptop over there, plug it in, and work for a few hours in somebody else's space. I can do that here. However, not I'm the marketing and proofreader, editor for Clemson Road Creative. I do not draft proposals. Right. You do that.
That's right.
I don't draft statements of work and do all of those artifacts and those products, deliverables that Clemson Road Creative has. You were the one that created those. I need them. Mm-hmm. I use them. Yeah. And that's what I'm hoping that others will actually start to say, you know what, entrepreneurism does not have to be alone on an island surrounded by hurricane force wind and storm surges, that it can actually be a community of entrepreneurs all actually assisting each other and growing together.
And we've talked about this being specifically, we think, a feminine business model, because it is about collaboration, and it's not about, voting each other off the island and coming here and stealing each other's customers. It's more about saying, hey, I've got these great tools and resources. Maybe they'll be of some use to you. Or, hey, I have this methodology. Maybe you could use it in your practice as well, because it might help you to sort of clarify the project goals for your customer. Yeah. So helping one another, knowing that there's plenty of business out there for all of us. Yeah. And there's plenty available for us to, if we put our heads down and do the work, there's plenty for us to be able to get what we're supposed to be getting out of this entrepreneurial journey.
And I think that's where we went with the, yes, like whatever products and services and things like that you're going to sell, you're going to have to evolve. You're going to have to pivot. You're going to make mistakes, and you're going to have things that you're like, oh, this one actually works. And it's this, tried and tested kind of of approach to business, which some people I think hear and go, oh no, that just, every mistake will cost money. Every mistake will cost money. And in reality, every mistake may delay money.
Right.
That's what it did for us.
Yeah, it just makes it a little bit, it just puts you a little bit further down the path, waiting for that revenue fountain, so to speak, to open up and start going. We talked about our practical entrepreneurs and being tried and tested, also about it being very change oriented, the idea that you can flip to whatever it is that you're finding success in. You can pivot, you can get traction in other places. I think both of those things are key. And then I think the last piece here is about not being satisfied with where you stand right now and wanting to grow to something bigger and wanting to grow to something better. And this doesn't mean that you have to, if you're a solopreneur and you're building your business on your own, it doesn't mean that you have to go and hire 35 people. That's not what I mean. I mean, saying I'm currently offering my customers what they need, and I want to continue to do that. And so you'll have to continue to innovate and find new products and find new services, because once your customers are satisfied on the one thing, may they always be hungry for more, right? Yeah. So keep feeding those customers what they're looking for so that they keep coming to you and they keep asking for help. So those 3 things in the show notes, you can get them down there in the video, and just click on that. Also a subscription link there for you as well. But this was our very first podcast. How do you think it went?
I'm pleased.
Yeah, I'm pleased too. For the most part, we enjoy each other's company, and I always enjoy my own company. So maybe others will enjoy our company as well.
There you go.
All right, that's it. This is Earning Miles. This is Clemson Road Creative's flagship podcast. We're glad to have you with us, from Jodie Kane-Smith and Kasie Whitener. We appreciate you guys. Come back and see us. And by all means, please be sweet to one another out there. Take care of each other out there. It's a short life. Live it well. Bye.